So people ask me all the time, where do I start? How do I get my feet wet? What is going to actually help serve me best when I think about starting with functional health testing? And, I love that I'm having more conversations about people waking up to this concept of we need the marriage of conventional and specialists and functional health, because functional health is the data that actually helps us get into proactive and preventative healthcare. Let's talk about functional health testing, because this is something that many people have asked me about. What functional health tests should I explore? What actually makes a difference? What's worth it? What's not? Is it a necessity? Do I need to start here? What is the point? And that's one of the things I want to dive into today, because I think the more you know about functional testing, the more you can make educated decisions about what's actually going to serve you best in the season that you're in. And so for those of you that might be newer to the podcast, my name is Erin Trier. I'm a mom of 4. I'm a functional women's health coach. I have been in the wellness space for over a decade, started more in the network marketing space, and have moved over into the functional space really the past 5 years or so. Have been going through a variety of different certifications, really diving deep into mentorship, amongst going through my own functional health journey. And so I have a lot of different episodes on the podcast where I dive a lot into what I've gone through, what my journey has been, the roadblocks I've experienced, the things I did in the wrong order, what I wish I knew then that I know now. That is what I continue to share here on the podcast. And this episode today is really about that. What have I learned that I can pass on to you that hopefully will continue to minimize the learning curve, so you're not just continuing to spin your wheels on a hamster wheel, not getting anywhere and feeling like you're not getting resolution, which quite honestly was something that I experienced for over 5 years. And so my goal as a coach is to continue to educate and empower women with education that I know is going to actually serve you best. I have learned from incredible mentors in this space, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to continue to pay it forward through the knowledge that I've learned both personally and professionally. And so let's talk a little bit today about functional health testing. What is it? Why does it matter? And what are the tests that I would actually recommend? So first things first, when I say functional health testing, this is the testing that 99% of the time our current healthcare system will not run and cover by insurance. Why? The question remains, right? But that is the truth, right? A lot of the functional testing available related to blood work, related to hormones, related to understanding your cortisol and your adrenal health, related to things like toxic burden, potential mold exposure, things like what's potentially aggravating the immune system. Nothing around those kinds of tests are actually covered by insurance or are part of mainstream healthcare. I pray every single day that it changes, but right now, these all fall into more of the functional health bucket of testing. It's not something that we have covered by insurance or that most doctors will run or cover, because it's just not part of what's available. All of these tests fall more into the bucket of preventative and proactive information. And so that is the thing to understand about the difference between like traditional, conventional testing versus functional testing. Functional testing most often looks much deeper and in a much more comprehensive way, looking more at the overall body systems, the ecosystem of how everything is working, and essentially helps you start to identify patterns or what might be going on from a dysfunctional standpoint or a deficiency standpoint, so you can start to figure out, how do I optimize my health? How do I feel better? How do I improve my energy? How do I get after the symptoms that I might be experiencing? That is the power of functional testing. And so why do you do it? So you can actually get the data and information on your body, so you know what the gaps are in your uniqueness, so then you can get really targeted and efficient with your healthcare practices. And so that's why I always recommend exploring functional testing in some capacity, because what you receive most often on the conventional medicine side doesn't give you a comprehensive enough picture. And more than that, it doesn't give you a clear roadmap to understanding the dysfunction that might be happening, but then an actual plan to help you get into action for targeting things. Okay. So what are the tests that I personally use? I've had people ask me, how does testing work? Where do you get testing done? What's the process? So as a functional health practitioner and coach, I have medical grade supplement stores that I use, and I also have specific certifications that allow me to order tests through reputable services. I use programming and places like Rupa Health. I use Vixia Diagnostics, And I also use FullScript to order tests, etc. I also use a platform called Practitioner Depot through one of the certifications I went through, where I can also have testing ordered and done, right? So I'm able to order tests as a functional health coach. And most often with my clients, I start with blood work, comprehensive blood work, because that is one of the core places we can start to identify patterns and get deeper into understanding what kind of deficiencies and imbalances you may have. Right? So functional comprehensive blood work is most often where I start. So this is looking at everything from comp metabolic to CBC to fasting glucose, fasting insulin, A1C, things like HSCRP, which is an inflammatory marker, your ferritin and iron, things like B12, your vitamin D, a full thyroid panel, which includes things like reverse T3, free T4, your thyroid antibodies. So it's far beyond just TSH, right? Things like your liver enzymes, your overall electrolytes, kidney markers, sex hormones, all of that, right? So it's a full comprehensive look at all of the different body systems in some capacity, as well as inflammatory markers, how we're looking metabolically, what's happening, from an immune system standpoint, et cetera. And so that is one of the places that I recommend starting with. And that is most often where I start with a lot of my clients. The next test that I dive into from time to time is something called the Dutch. And this is a specific test that measures hormone metabolites. It essentially looks at how is your body utilizing hormones and detoxifying hormones in your specific physiology. And so this is how we start to look at where is your testosterone at? Where is your estrogen at? Where is your progesterone at? What's happening with your adrenal health and your cortisol? What's going on with things like your neurotransmitters? It helps us see, again, how the body is detoxifying hormones. And so one of the things that happens often in midlife is women experience all kinds of symptoms hormonally because they're not actually detoxifying well. So that helps us start to identify, okay, we need to support the liver more. We need to support the gut more. We need to make sure that we're putting specific things in place to help your body get rid of the excessive hormones it doesn't need. And that is one of the reasons that symptoms can start to crop up and become debilitating, because women don't know how they're detoxifying, but they're also just recycling things and not detoxifying well. So it's kind of this twofold process of uncovering, again, what's going on from a hormonal standpoint, but also a cortisol standpoint, and continuing to figure out, like, okay, how do we support the body best? Another test that I recommend and use often with clients is something called the GI map. And this is how we look at the gut. Why does that matter? So many of us, and myself included, don't really understand the power of the gut and how much it regulates literally everything in the body. I don't know if you know this, but this is something that I've learned recently over the past 5, 6, 7 years in my education, et cetera, is 80% of our immune system lives in the gut. So if we're getting sick all the time, if we have reactions to foods, if our nervous system is overloaded, all of that somehow is connected back to the immune system, which is connected back to the gut. And so when we have overall dysfunctioning happening, where we're having gut symptoms, bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux, we have food sensitivities, food reactions, our skin starts to flare up, things like acne, etc. If we have autoimmune patterns that pop up on blood work, if we have inflammation that won't go away, we get into weight loss resistance, all of that in some capacity ties back to the gut and how the gut is functioning. Is the gut actually absorbing what you're consuming? Does it have adequate stomach acid to actually break down the food and the nutrients that you're eating? Is the lining compromised? And so things that shouldn't be seeping into the bloodstream just seep right on through. It is so incredibly powerful to learn how much the gut is responsible for our overall well-being. And so we have to understand that because the gut influences everything from nutrient absorption to inflammation to immune activation, detoxification, hormone clearance, and more, this is something we look at because so many of us, if not all of us, have some level of gut dysfunction happening. You want to know the number one stressor against gut function and what most often causes gut dysbiosis or gut dysfunction at the core? It's stress. We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. head to aaronshire.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is aaronshire.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation. And I'm actually learning this in real time right now in my life because I've had ebbs and flows of stress happening. And the more I get into different kinds of stress seasons and the more I have to really recognize stress in my body and how to manage stress, I notice differences inside of how my gut functions. It is wildly eye-opening when you start to realize, okay, my stress is affecting everything in my body, including my gut, including my brain, including my energy, including all of the things. And so GI maps are a super awesome test to dive into so you can continue to see like, how is your body responding? And what are the symptoms you might be having and why? The next test I love, and this is one of the most transformative tests that I did on my personal healing journey, is a test called the MRT. This is a test where you can actually see what might be causing inflammation, skin issues, joint pain, gut symptoms, headaches, stuff like that, based on foods or things in your environment that are overreacting or overstimulating the immune system. So this is where you can get a notch deeper on how do you really get into nutrition strategies that really serve your body best. Because some people go through gut protocols, get a GI map, get into specific kinds of foods that they're focusing on, and they still have issues. That was my story. I reached a point where I felt sick no matter what I ate. It didn't matter how clean I was eating or what I was cutting out. I still had gut issues. Once I got deeper into the MRT and started to realize what foods were actually also aggravating my immune system, that started to change the game for me. And it was huge to understand that level of personalization when it comes to nutrition. The other test that I think can be powerful, but this is one that you kind of have to really understand related to history. And that's something called the total tox test. This is where you can start to really get into, environmental toxins, heavy metals, mold exposure, etc. And this kind of test, I believe, is worth it when you have a specific kind of history, when you have symptoms that really haven't been moved or touched at all based on everything that you've done up until this point. If you definitely know you've had mold exposure at some point in some capacity, whether that's on a trip, in a home, whatever, this can be really powerful because the truth is mold can be really sneaky. Our house actually went through a full home remediation when we uncovered mold in our basement. And it led us to having to do a full family deep dive protocol for 9 to 10 months where we had to go strictly into very significant dietary change, significant supplement protocols, really working as a team to go after healing specifically my son's body because we found the mold in his closet in his room after a leak that was going on for almost a year. And so it was a very eye-opening, long process. And so when I talk about mold or I, give people an explanation around mold, the biggest thing I share is tread lightly and don't just chase just to chase. It has to be really related to something significant that you've had exposure to. That's when I believe that's worth it. But these specific tests are what I really believe are the most worth it. Comprehensive blood work, Dutch testing, GI map, and then getting into the total tox if you really need that, right? Now, the other thing that can be really beneficial is addressing cortisol rhythm. And the nice thing is there's another layer to the Dutch test where you can do a 5-point cortisol reading to see what's happening with your cortisol over a 24-hour period, not just at one specific point in the day. And that can be really eye-opening to understand, how are your adrenals functioning? Are you living in total fight or flight? Are you totally burned out or not? This is the kind of thing that can be really, really beneficial when you're thinking about, how do I unpack what's happening with my physiology? How do I continue to unpack my symptoms and understand exactly what's going on and why? And so these are the tests that I recommend. These are the ones that I think are most worth it. Now, where do you actually start? A lot of people ask me about what's the best place to start. How do I get my feet wet when it comes to functional health? I think more and more people are waking up to this idea of functional health is the way. We need this marriage of conventional and functional. We need to have proactive and preventative resources and information and data available to us. Because if we don't, we cannot be proactive for our longevity. And that's a problem. So having this marriage of conventional resources, specialists, and functional health practices where you can get proactive and preventative data on your unique deficiencies and imbalances, that's where it's at. Like that is the magic. And I love that I'm having more and more conversations with people that are waking up to this, that are understanding, okay, I don't have enough information. And so when I think about what is the best place to start, the best place to start is having a full assessment done of your lifestyle. And this gets missed, full transparency. People think that they have it dialed in. People think that they're doing what they need to do. People think that they're being healthy enough. People think that they have the basics mastered. I'm here to tell you that is not reality. Full transparency. And I've learned this because of my own journey with the coaches that I've had help me continue to identify my blind spots. And I do this with my clients because none of us are as dialed in or as on point or as buckled up as we believe to be in our brains. That's the truth. And so evaluating your lifestyle and your health history is where you start, right? Like where have you been? Where have you come from? What has your history been? But what does your current lifestyle look like right now? What are you actually doing? What do your habits look like? What do your routines look like? Are they as good as you think they are? Probably not. That's the truth. Because we like to play tricks on ourselves, right? Our brain will make us believe that somehow we're doing a great job when in reality, we all have blind spots. We all have things we need to improve. And this is what gets missed. And quite honestly, it drives me crazy because so many jump straight into peptides, straight into hormones, straight into all of these tests and optimization things and miss the foundational basics of evaluating your lifestyle. So that is where you start. You evaluate your lifestyle first, and you do this with a knowledgeable coach, someone like me or someone who's a functional health coach that works lifestyle significantly. Full transparency too, there's a difference between functional doctor and functional health coach. You need both, in my opinion. Functional doctor and functional health coach play different roles. Functional health coach is the one that helps you actually evaluate your lifestyle and helps you identify the gaps in what you need to do foundationally before you dive into testing, you dive into optimization tools, etc. Once you evaluate history and you have somebody that helps you start to unpack what's going on with your daily habits, routines, lifestyle, etc., then continuing to figure out testing can be really powerful. I always recommend starting with blood work. Like I said, it's easy, it's simplified. You can easily identify patterns. It's a great starting place. You can start to get after the entire ecosystem, supporting detoxification and inflammation, as well as metabolic health and so much more, right? One of the things that often gets misinterpreted in women's health specifically is this idea of my hormones are off now in midlife. But what we have to understand about hormones is hormones are downstream. They are not the front bowling pin, right? So anything with hormonal fluctuations, yes, it plays a larger role in the ecosystem. But if hormones are depleted in some way or super elevated in some way or are not optimal, we have to be looking at more of the system. It's not just a hormone picture. It's not just a hormone problem. It's an ecosystem problem. It's a functionality problem. It's a metabolic problem. It's a detoxification problem. It's an ecosystem thing that we have to assess overall, right? And so blood work is one of the ways you can do that as a starting point. So I always think it's a great place to start. The next place that I usually recommend is a GI map. Hormones and Dutch can be relevant as a next step, depending on your specific situation, symptoms, how you're feeling. But most often a GI map is the next step. And this is the case even if you have no gut symptoms. And this is something I've also learned as a coach. Sometimes the people that need the most support in the gut don't have any symptoms. And that might be because they've been living in chronic stress for decades. They're disconnected from their body. Symptoms are happening small enough underneath the hood that they just don't fully recognize everything all the time. It's all possible. And I've seen it happen. And we talk about this a lot in our functional health coaching community, is how sometimes the gut cases that need the most support, the most restoration, the most addressing of potential dysfunction are the people that don't have really significant symptoms. That's why a GI map is so powerful, because you can see what are the overgrowths. What are the things happening from a dysfunctional standpoint? Where does the gut need more support? Do you have pathogens present? Do you have parasites present? Is your immune system overactivated? Do you even have what you need to absorb things, right? What's happening with stomach acid, etc.? There's so much that you can uncover. And again, the gut is one of the primary resources that actually helps metabolic function work efficiently. And so we have to always be looking at the gut. So gut is usually the next place, like a GI map, and then maybe the Dutch, right? Now, the big thing to understand with testing, especially when it comes to women, if you are in perimenopause, or maybe you're not in perimenopause yet. If you are in perimenopause, which essentially means your cycles are fluctuating, they're longer, they're shorter, the length of them is longer, shorter, that means you're in perimenopause, right? And when that happens, you have to be mindful of when the testing is done. Timing of testing matters too, right? For things like certain markers in the blood work or the GI map, that doesn't necessarily matter as far as timing. When you're testing hormones specifically with blood work, timing for that matters. When you're doing the Dutch test to look at hormones, that matters too, right? Typically, the best time for these kinds of tests is on a typical cycle, days 19 to 21. If your cycles are irregular, meaning they're anywhere from like 23 to 32 days or longer and they're erratic, ideal testing timing for things like hormones and blood work or the Dutch test is 5 to 7 days post-ovulation. So in those cases, it's really powerful to track ovulation, get some ovulation strips off Amazon, or maybe you're someone that has an Oura ring, et cetera, and you track temperatures and you understand when you're ovulating. But if your cycles are erratic, you have to understand the timing matters. Otherwise, the reality of what your hormones are showing on testing isn't going to be accurate. So timing matters. And I want to make sure you know that. So I hope this was helpful in some capacity. I know testing can be really overwhelming. And a lot of people ask me again, how do you do it? Where do you start? What matters? What's worth it? And that's really what I wanted to highlight today. There are a lot of things that are worth it, but I will be the coach that always shares with you. Order of operations matters. If you are not going deep enough into the foundations of your health and getting honest about what you're not doing and what you're choosing instead to keep yourself stuck, any kind of testing, any kind of supplement, any kind of optimization tool is not going to help you to the degree that it could. And I say this from direct experience. I have had coaches that have had to call me on my BS. And that's literally what I want to continue to pay forward, because the more you have someone do this for you, the more you're going to have breakthrough. The more you're going to get to where you actually want to go on your health. But you got to be open and honest. You got to be willing to take the feedback. You have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. You have to be open to people giving you some sort of reality check around what you're doing and what you're not doing, where you can improve, where you might need support. That is the thing that will change the game for you. And I know this to be true because I get the privilege of doing this work every single day with so many amazing women. And it's just such a gift because none of us can do this work alone. We have to get educated and empowered, but then we have to have some level of accountability and team atmosphere and someone to troubleshoot this with us. Because without somebody that can help us look at all of the information and help us take action, we're not going to be able to get far. And so I want you to remember that. You're not meant to do this all alone. And if there's anything specific I can answer for you around testing, around timing of testing, around what tests are worth it, about where you're at in your journey, if you'd like to do an assessment of your lifestyle to actually see if testing is necessary yet, all of that is information and details I can share with you at any point in time as a coach. And I would love to connect whenever it feels best to you as far as getting additional support goes. Just head to the show notes and all of my information is there. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.